Hey guys, it's Mr. Wolfe here, and I'm going to be going over inheritance with multiple traits. So thus far with Punnett squares, we've really been talking about traits where there's just two alleles for that trait. So what do I mean by that? Well, with pea color, well, you could either have yellow or you could have green, and there's just two options there. All right, but there's plenty other of traits where you have more than just two options. So for an example, blood type. You could have three different types of alleles for blood type. You could have a dominant allele that makes an A protein, another dominant allele that makes a B protein, or a recessive allele that doesn't make any protein at all. Okay, so what are these proteins, by the way? They're really just these kind of almost like tags or ID cards that cells have on their surface, so the body recognizes these cells and says, okay, like you're supposed to be here, or if it's a bacteria or a foreign invader, they'll see a different tag and they'll realize it's not supposed to be there, and they'll attack that foreign invader. Okay, so if you're type A blood, well, you're going to have this A protein on the surface of your red blood cells. And so for the alleles for that, you could be homozygous dominant. You could have both alleles that make the A protein, or you could be heterozygous and you just have that one allele that makes your A protein, and the other is just a recessive allele that doesn't make any protein at all, but you're still going to have that phenotype of having type A blood. And if you are type B blood, you're going to have the B protein on your red blood cell surface, and just like our type A blood, you could either be homozygous dominant or heterozygous. Right, if you are type AB blood, you could probably guess at this point you're going to have the phenotype of having both A and B proteins. And so in order to have this, you're going to have both dominant alleles. They're both going to be expressed, right? You fully express the A protein, you fully express the B protein as well, and you're going to be type AB blood. Now if you are type O, so your cell just looks like this. So knowing blood type is going to be really important when it comes to donating blood, because only certain types of blood could donate to people with other types of blood. And if you give someone the wrong type of blood in a blood transfusion, that their blood could actually clump together and that person could die just from getting the wrong blood. So why is that? Well, we have these proteins, right? Let's say this is my patient's going to have type A blood, and all of us are also going to have these antibodies. And all these antibodies they're proteins that are just also traveling around the blood, and they're kind of just like making sure that everything in the blood is supposed to be there. So they're going to like bump into this red blood cell, they recognize that it's an A, and they're like, okay, this cell is cool, it's going to be one of ours. But then you might have a bacteria in your cell that might have, let's say, protein X, right? And these antibodies are going to bump into that bacteria. They're going to recognize that protein that's not supposed to be there, and these antibodies are going to clump around it, and then your body's going to attack those cells that are foreign, that aren't supposed to be there. So let's say we have a person with type A blood donate to this patient. Right? Now we have this donor's red blood cells in the patient's blood, and these antibodies are going to bump into these A proteins, and they're going to recognize these A proteins as their own. There's really no difference between them, and so a type A person can donate to a type A person. Now let's say that we have a type O person donate to a person with type A. Well, these antibodies are going to bump into this cell, and well, there's no proteins to recognize, and so if there's no foreign proteins to recognize in this case, these antibodies aren't going to clump around the cell, and this works out too. So just by having no proteins, type O people could donate to everyone. They're the universal donor. All right. Now let's say we have type B blood to donate to type A. Well, now we have these type B cells in the bloodstream. These antibodies are going to run into the type B proteins, and they're going to recognize it as something that's not supposed to be in the body, right? They're going to attack this cell, and the blood's going to start to coagulate, and it's going to clump together, and that person could die from that blood transfusion. An example of a Punnett square with multiple alleles with blood type. And let's say we have a parent with AB blood and another parent with type O blood. And so let's see what alleles they could pass down, or what genotypes they would have in the first place. So for the first parent, they're going to have that dominant A protein or allele, and then the dominant B allele as well, and they could just pass down either or. And then if you're type O, you're going to have both recessive alleles, which just means that you're not really going to make a protein at all, and you could pass down either of those. So let's set it up. Over on this side we have dominant A, the dominant B, and then I, and I. Little I, little I. All right, so when we do this cross, we're going to get something like this, where the parent's donating one of their dominant alleles, and then the other parent dominates their recessive alleles, and it's going to be the exact same thing as we go down our column. All right, so let's figure out the genotype percentages. The first thing we want to do is just look, what are our possible genotypes? So in this case, it looks like we just have two. You could either be heterozygous for type A blood, big A, little I, or heterozygous for type B blood, big B, little I. I'm going to look at my Punnett square, and it looks like out of 4 squares, I have 1, 2 of this type of genotype, big A, little I, and so that's going to be 1/2 of that type, of that heterozygous type A blood, and then it's also going to be 1/2 of that heterozygous type B blood as well. Now let's go on to that phenotype ratio. So we could either have, if we have this genotype, heterozygous A, well, that person's going to be type A. And if we have heterozygous B, well, that person's going to have the phenotype of type B blood. And in this case, it's going to be the exact same type of ratio, right? 1/2 are going to be type A, and the other half are going to be type B. All right. So I want you guys to try out a new example. So it's going to be a cross between parents with both of them are going to have type AB blood. So the first thing you need to do is just figure out what are their genotypes going to be. And then you're going to do your Punnett square and then figure out your genotype and phenotype ratios. All right, guys, thanks for watching.